Good morning. We are going to call this board workshop to order. It is 8 a.m. on Thursday, May 23rd. We're going to start off with a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. I don't think we got any public input cards, so moving right along into item 3.01, District Staffing Plan. Mr. Chad Farnsworth.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Appreciate everybody coming in a little early this morning. I know it's a busy time as we close out the school year and there's tons of things to attend to, so just offering up you guys time, I greatly appreciate it. Today's presentation is you have this, first I'll tell you what you have in your folder. The first is the presentation and the slides. Sometimes it's easier to look out on hard copy and take some notes. And then the second is our current staffing plan, the document you guys usually love so much because it's quite confusing. But at least you can look at a column that's labeled 23, 24 if you start thinking to yourself, well, how many of those do we currently have? So it's just something you can reference and take with you. But the core of the presentation, the page numbers are listed to where that position will be located when I refer to them. But the core of the presentation, the focus is just within the actual presentation itself. We are preparing for the district staffing plan to come to the June 10th, 2024 agenda. So as we go over things today, undoubtedly there'll be some tweaks and minor changes that might need to occur. And any changes based on you guys' feedback or concerns, we've got a couple weeks to put those in. So if there's something that really weighs on you even after today's meeting and you want to reach out and discuss some of those things, please feel free to reach out to any member of the senior staff that kind of coincides with any change or anything that you're concerned with. Also, what you'll see when we come to the June 10th meeting, we're still working on some different job descriptions. So we're talking about the number of positions and things today, but there are some tweaks and changes that are both related and non-related to today's presentation that you might see on job descriptions. We're in the final stages of double checking those and making sure that they're where those need to be. So we'll get those to you ahead of time to take a good look at them, and they'll be posted. I believe it's June 3rd when the agenda posts, but as soon as we get the edits completed on those and any changes that might occur and any impacts that it might have, we'll share those with you ahead of time. So essentially what we'll do today is I'll have special guests that come up and join me as their section comes along, so you'll get to see some of our famous faces. And starting off with our esteemed leader, Ms. Cornegie. She is going to go over some much needed changes in security services, and she'll take time now to explain some of that to you.
And certainly this is the work of Mr. Mabry and many others as we look at this chart. So what you're going to see is that, first of all, school safety and security is, of course, my #1 priority, and it is the reason why it sits directly under me. It is the only other department besides our communications department that is under my oversight, both in proximity as well as daily communications to ensure a safe and secure campus for every student. We know that this is the one area that has been met with the most legislative changes year after year. And one of the things that has happened is as those, like the behavior, the threat management legislation and all that has come about, we've grown this department to deal with some of these compliance pieces as well. But we know that student discipline has been an ongoing issue for the past several years. It's probably the biggest frustration that we hear from teachers as well as from parents and administrators. And so we started bringing district departments together to talk about whether or not our current structure makes sense and whether or not it is the best way to proceed in terms of ensuring that we eliminate a lot of that frustration and increase school safety and security, as well as we know that many of the contributing factors have to do with student behaviors. So we have currently, across the district in various departments, individuals that oversee student discipline. For example, we have program specialists in our ESE department. We have one that's designated with 504s. We have gen ed specialist. We have alternative education department that has some student discipline. And so one of the things that we heard from school leaders is often, I don't know who to call. I pick up the phone, I call someone, they say, oh, well, that's ESE, call ESE. Or they call a different department and maybe they're getting a different answer. And so one of the things we wanted to do is to eliminate that frustration by taking all of those individuals that are across various departments, bring them all under school safety and security, again, over my direct purview. And so what you're seeing here is in the third column over, the ones that are existing, of course, is our admin coordinator for school safety with all the compliance pieces. They also oversee our Guardian program, and then the district threat management coordinator and all of the work that goes into that. But what you're seeing now is a new column, in the third column, which is that admin coordinator of student discipline. This is not a new position. It is currently in alternative education. We're looking at moving that individual in that position under this department, also bringing them closer in proximity so they're all within the same department, because the coordination between these individuals has been a problem as well because they're spread out so far across the district. Then moving that program specialist for ESC and 504, making that one person. Those are existing positions that we'll be able to bring in, and then actually adding one for the general education side of the house, all under that admin coordinator. So when packets come in, whether it be on the school safety side through the threat management piece, or just behavioral discipline issues that are coming from the schools, they'll have one person to call, one department to call, and then they will distribute to those program specialists and coordinate, again, with our ESC department as well as student services to make sure that we're all on the same page, that everything's consistent, and that schools do not have to call multiple people to get an answer or get multiple answers depending on who they call. Underneath that department, they'll have all the SUSR work, all of the reporting and complete pieces, as well as overseeing our code of conduct, student discipline, expulsions, and the student placements. Again, those are sitting right now in multiple departments or pieces of it in various departments. So we're putting them all under one. So if we go to the next slide, what you'll see in order to do this, and this was some thoughtful work, again, of a lot of departments, that in order to do that, we needed to add, for that department does not have a secretary. That secretary currently, what we want to leave in the alt ed department, I believe that's where they are currently, does all of the scheduling of the student conduct meetings. They do all the paperwork. There's a lot that goes into that position, so we want to add that, and it can come out of millage because it's directly tied to student safety, as well as that program specialist. Actually, that's the ESC 504 one that we're adding, and then bringing over the gen ed one. I had that backwards. And then the current admin coordinator, again, was in alt ed, and because they're moving to school safety and security, we can, there's a cost savings because we're able to move that position to millage as well. That is not a new position, but there are two new positions that you'll see on the staffing plan, and that is the secretary and the program specialist for ESC, and the move of the other one. So that was a really quick overview of what we're accomplishing and what I think will be a better structure for our schools and our students.
So is it two new positions or really one? Because the way I thought you described it was the program specialist for ESC and the program specialist for 504 were two existing positions that were making one and then adding the gen ed. Wouldn't that just be a wash and then just adding the one secretary?
No, that's actually a new position because the program specialists that are currently doing that work, they need to continue.
Got it. Okay.
Their focus will shift a little bit.
Got it.
But we know we're already understaffed in those departments, and so we wanted to add that as a new position rather than.
Sure. I think that's great work.
So this new person, are they housed in ESC or security?
So they're going to be in school safety and security.
Just wanted to clarify the structure of this chart here. Some of these boxes, they represent people, but some of these boxes, I think, represent responsibilities or tasks. Is that right?
That would be true.
Is there a way to maybe distinguish if, like, so, like, under admin coordinator for safety, that's the admin coordinator is a person, but compliance is not another person, right?
Right, yeah,
SSAT is not another person, but guardians are people.
correct.
So I don't know if there's a way to, like, color code or texturize or some way to format this thing to know which ones are people and which ones are
I believe if you
tasks.
look at it, it's hard to tell. The darker there's a darker shade of yellow, then the lighter shade of yellow, and a darker shade of green, and a lighter shade of green. So I think that might be, from what I can tell.
We don't have color.
Okay. Oh,
But if you go back and.
well, sorry, I thought it was still on the screen. I apologize.
There we go. I didn't even look at that.
I
was
didn't
looking at
change
this.
that, so.
The darker shades of yellow, those are people. The lighter shades are,
No,
maybe,
these are
maybe.
people
Other than
too.
Guardian.
We can, except for the numbers on,
Okay.
so we can tweak that. This is really a visual representation for you guys. So we can get Mr. Mabry to work on that a little bit.
It would also be nice, since there are lots of new, if we could know who that block represents. Like,
Okay.
You got me? Okay, thank you.
Sometimes that's helpful. What is this position? Oh, that's so-and-so. Okay, yeah, I know what they do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And we can provide all of that to you guys in a very organized fashion. For staffing plan purposes, we try to make it positions and not people so much, just because it gets very personal.
Yeah.
So,
Can I just clarify, and I think that this is what Mr. Brandyberg was trying to get to, just to make sure I understand. On page 2 of 12 of the current, the 23-24 staffing plan?
Yes.
That's that choice and alternative ed, that admin coordinator, that's who's coming over here?
yes, there will be an admin coordinator that moves from,
Okay,
From alternative ed.
Yes.
right, that's that person that's coming over. So then when you look at the funding, really, that's what you were saying, the secretary and the program specialist are new, but the admin is not. It's just being pulled from a different funding source, and it's coming from that department.
correct. And I do believe the funding source for the position that's moving is also changing also, and you'll see that towards.
Okay,
That's great.
thank you.
And the law enforcement box, that's blue and green because these are not really our employees. Is that right?
That is correct.
Sheriff's office and then the.
All right.
Police departments, yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm tracking, but if there were a little legend, for the public, I think it'd just be helpful.
I got you.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we move to the next slide?
Yes.
All right. So business services, we've got the risk management, a change in risk management. So Mr. Ward's going to come up for the first time today and talk about this position, and then he'll return to us later.
So currently, we have two benefit specialists that are in risk management. We also have a third person that our insurance consultant provides, and at no cost to us, it's built into our contract. So what we would like to do is add a third benefit specialist and let that contracted one go back, and they will give us a $30,000 credit on our contract. And the reason why we'd like to bring that person in is because that person can handle other benefits outside of the contract that we have in our benefits department. And again, it's related to the health insurance, so that person would be paid through the health insurance trust fund, so it doesn't have a direct impact on the general fund.
But it's a $30,000 credit, and we're valuing it at $66,000?
Yeah, so the impact to us would be $36,000 increase.
They're obviously paying the other person 30.
Correct.
I understand why.
Well,
Saying-
they're
I believe it'd be in market.
it's not that they're paying that person 30, they're probably paying that person the full 66. They're only charging us 30 for it. They're not full-time with us.
This person, they have
Sure.
other organizations that they're working with too.
That's my understanding,
Price
correct.
Their total value.
Okay. Any other
Good, buddy.
questions?
That's
Yeah.
easy.
All right, thank you.
Okay, the next is within my departments, compensation employee relations. First, this is a change that it's not a change in salary increase for the person, but there's a change in value of benefits. So that's what that number represents in the $20,551. Essentially aligning to what's common in other districts and also working towards what we're dealing with from a growth of that department and responsibilities that it's evolved through the years. This is a working supervisor who has their hands in things constantly and really is a go-to person for the district to handle most things controversial. So a little insight into how the department and the responsibilities have changed. You know, we saw from 2018 to 2022, we were averaging about 21.75 cases a year that reached a district level to investigate. And then we saw that spike in 22-23, and it went to 54 cases that they were major cases they were dealing with. And you guys were gracious, and we added a manager to help deal with those investigations and all the other things that come along with responsibilities within the department. The core of their responsibilities is investigations, but they touch on several different areas that I'll mention in a second. So currently where we stand, we've seen another 30% increase in major investigations, and we're up to 70 and major investigations this year, and we have not reached July 1 yet. And we're also, there's been a heaping of new things we're dealing with that have fallen into that department, which I'm planning for in the future also. But the world of athletics has become much more complex and evolves. While we'll have a district athletic director that can handle the entry-level investigations of things and initial collection, but the overall skill and overall depth that it takes to manage some of the more controversial and deeper investigations, this person attends to themselves. So that's just part of that major increase. They also deal with all district leave, whether it be long-term, FMLA, or sick donation, which was a new thing we added this year, which is, you guys will hear more about that in a different setting. It's been a successful pilot program. They deal with all retirement and retirement services. They have now been established as the district contact for state-mandated Title IX and equity compliance. We had that contact split between students and adults, but now everything resides due to recommendation from the state with one individual. So all Title IX compliance comes through them. And we also see, we're also have another layer of dealing with issues of sexual harassment and harassment that is requiring, it's almost like a double duty sometimes, because we have our investigations and then there's some different structure that has to occur whenever it does involve something that might encounter sexual harassment. And in the past, we have not seen many of those issues, but unfortunately, we're seeing an uptick of those also. That also sets compensation for everyone in the district that's not on, that has to consider experience and evaluate, has to evaluate different levels of experience and across all, even on our hourly employees as well as our salaried. Countless hours of research and support to other schools. They essentially, beyond the 70 cases that reach our level, they're advising 15 schools, 10 to 15 schools a day on how to handle school level discipline and guide them and advise them through that process. And when anything rises above, say a written reprimand, a lot of times we deal with those also. That's kind of that threshold that raises it to the district. Depends on the depth of what the misconduct is, on whether it stays at the school or rises. But it's a full day every day, advising and providing support for those schools. And then lastly, tremendous amount of training, whether it's for upcoming administrators or helping APs understand how to navigate that process, or our departments, which it used to be just schools. Now we're constantly addressing departments, and there's a tremendous amount. We've put some layers in of training for food service, because now they're in charge of some things that you'll hear a little more about whenever I get to my next section. So that is the justification and rationale for increasing this from supervisor to director position. Any questions on that?
So when you say it doesn't change the salary, it changes the benefits.
Yes, that's
Is there a
correct.
higher FRS contribution for the district or something?
Yes,
Is that what's
that's
driving
where it's
that?
represented in that. Yes, sir. Next slide. Food service. I know this is a priority to you guys to make sure our students are fed well, and we're constantly trying to improve those departments. Also, what we have on the horizon, what we're facing is we've got to prepare for the future. Over the next year and a half, 2 years, we've got over 100 years of food service experience retiring. So we've got to get ready for that. Okay, sorry, I was looking at. So in order to do that, we need to do some restructuring. So what you saw last year is we removed the burden of support and managing the employees completely off of the principals while trying to maintain that relationship they still have at the school. But we've got so much our principals are responsible for, being the academic and instructional leaders in their buildings. I felt like this was a necessity. And, so far, other than a few hiccups along the way, it's been a good experience. And we've got our field techs that currently are exempt employees that are going out and they're conducting evaluations. And principals still have the ability to have input on evaluations and hiring and discipline if necessary or if requested. We welcome that. But there's just a tremendous amount more responsibility. And the reason we need to make a few of these changes is, for one, it aligns what's more common, but also it allows some. It's a little easier to understand, because if a field tech comes out, you think of a field technician. Are they working on equipment? Are they working on software? What are they doing? And this puts them into a little different category to help manage some of the issues that go on out there. So essentially what you'll have is, and you see on the slide, is we will be adding we'll be changing the current supervisor to a director level position. That is what is across all districts, and that's what occurs. You keep in mind, we're essentially in charge of, 45 restaurants across the district that serves more food probably than any organization around, breakfast and lunch, correct? So what we are working to do is we will have a supervisor now, and that's where that additional cost comes in. There will not be an increase associated with the director as far as salary, but the supervisor will be a new position, and that's what you see that cost increase being. So the hope is that over the next year and a half, we'll groom that person to take over and lead the department, which, it's a little bit of anxiety around that, but I feel like with the proper time and attention that it will be a smooth transition. Currently, you'll see a district food service manager. That changes the title, and there is an increase going to the professional managerial scale, because we currently have a food service office manager that has kind of for years served as a second to the supervisor, but this will be someone that is in the office and is helping run the department as a whole, and working on all the different responsibilities that, it's kind of amazing we've gotten away as long as we can have with kind of an office manager title, considering the amount of responsibility that person has shared with the department. And then what you see is the current 6 food service field technicians. They will move over to the professional managerial scale also. And that's the ones that are now doing those evaluations, that are doing the discipline, but also really going in and providing support to the cafeterias. Because what we've found is some of the quality that we're looking for and where it's lacking and what we're losing is essentially due to the inconsistencies across our cafeterias on providing the kids with what's truly been menued and what's been researched and what we're providing to the kids. We get people that kind of go off on their own and do some of their own things. And whether that's not within guidelines or whether that's not following the research-based practices that we found, because we watch the meal counts, we watch what kids are interested in and not interested in, and we make adjustments. So part of that oversight and support, providing resources out to schools, is a big factor of us improving the quality of what we can provide to the kids, because what they really need is consistency. And also, and we're also looking at ways, okay, how does this new structure impact the schools. So we'll be surveying principals and collecting their feedback on how the new structure has worked so far as we adapt, and making adjustments according to that. And also, part of the supervisor position is they'll be in charge of a student committee that gets to come in and provide feedback, and that'll be interesting, right? I see you smiling. So they'll actually, we'll have a method for building kind of a student work group to help provide feedback on what they do and do not like. We have some analytics that we do. There are surveys they can take and rate, and they do. They rate it on the app that's associated with the menu that you can get online. And we do, and it proves true when you lay out what's being sold and what's being picked up versus versus what they're rating it. We just like to see a higher frequency of data collected, so. That's what I've got for that.
I have a question. You go
Okay, I
ahead.
figured there'd be plenty.
Ms. Luke, you can go ahead.
My question is just to clarify, the director, food service, and the supervisor will be filled. So again, this was helpful giving us last year, so I appreciate that. Page 6 of 12, so I
Yep.
see where there's a supervisor for food service.
Correct.
So we're keeping that and we're adding a director, or we're adding another supervisor?
So the director is being, the current supervisor
Is being
is
promoted to
being
director.
promoted to director.
And we'll fill supervisor.
And then we will fill
Okay, good.
supervisor.
Okay.
We looked at some different models because we were like, okay, what does an assistant supervisor look like? But it just got kind of weird. So
Yeah.
these are the terms we came up with. We're like, you know what? We're going to go director, supervisor, district manager out of the office, and then area managers out at the schools. And then we've got and then it trickles down to our cafeteria managers and our food service managers in the cafeterias, and then assistant managers and down to food service.
Okay, that helps. I wrote adding a director. I just want to make sure I was right on that. That's good.
So my question is more about how it works.
Okay.
Let's say parent John Bull has a question. Now, he's upset with the cafeteria. Who does he call, and how does he know who to call?
He would be directed either to a field tech currently, but which would become an area manager. If it's beyond, if they haven't been able to resolve their issues with the manager at the school, then it would go to the currently field tech, but now an area manager, to help deal with those issues. And if it has something to do, which we've seen with food content or allergies or things of that nature, then it moves to our nutritionist, who we staff at the district, which is, we'll talk more about later, but not today because she's been with us a long time also. So we've got to prepare for the future with that also. So it kind of depends on what the complaint is, but it keeps elevating up the chain based on what it is. Say if there's something that involves procurement, then it would probably come, or purchasing or things like that, it would come to the district manager, but most likely move right up to the supervisor or director.
So I guess my concern is, are parents having to wait a long time to get an answer?
I would hope not.
Okay, so they can get through all this process, saying if their kid, for whatever the reason, has a problem at breakfast, they can get through it before the end of the day.
Yeah, we should be able to do that just fine. Like I said, it depends on the discrepancy that we're trying to resolve. And the goal is always to handle it at the lowest level, because that'll get it there the quickest, right?
Okay.
So who reports to would be these area managers? Do people report, so you talked about, and maybe I misunderstood, so they would be handling some discipline over other employees, so they're not directing just processes, but now people,
Correct.
they're leading people.
Yes.
This is where I've always struggled in our district in understanding, because in some places managers do that, some places they don't, some places we say they can, and some places we say that they can't. I would love to just see us figure out our nomenclature across the district so that a manager means one thing in one spot and it means the same thing in another spot.
I think I would like that also, but I think as I've done research, it becomes impossible. We have such, as you look down our professional managerial chart, it's everywhere from instruction to curriculum to food service to, it covers so many different areas. And sometimes they're managing a few people, sometimes they might be managing no people, and just a tremendous amount of processes. And then sometimes they might have a slew of folks under them, or a combination of all. So I've had the same thought also, and I've done research on it, and look, what truly is a manager of people, or is a manager of processes? And what I've found is most people, they're a little bit of both. And that's where my struggles come in to try and separate it. So I'm always open to try and figure out how we get that a little more normed, but it's just difficult when we represent so many different departments that handle such a variety of tasks. But I'm open to any
You've always
suggestions.
had thoughts on this.
I'm open
No, I
to
hear both
suggestions
sides.
that you guys have, certainly.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was just surprised when you talked about this person, you know, leading people, as
Mm-hmm.
just know so many other places they don't, or it happens in practice, but not necessarily on paper. So, I don't know, I'm just trying to track along.
Yep, and these will come back. There'll be some tweaks and things to job descriptions, like I said, that you'll see some differences in their responsibilities. But for the most part, what we have is the field techs have kind of been doing this for years as far as providing support to people, but the management of their leave, the feedback on resources and discipline and dealing with complaints and evaluations, that's kind of what's involved with the position. It's, like I said, there's been some aches and pains we've managed to work through fairly well, in my opinion, and there's some we'll probably figure out along the way as we receive feedback from principals and also kind of explore and do some reflection on the year.
The other thing that I think really stood out to me is you kind of perked up my ears, where you were talking about some vehicle there of increased student engagement in the process. So, you know, so I asked my kids if they ever use the app, because I remember when we first
Yep.
voted on this new system
Yep.
coming in, there was like this electronic menu, they'd be able to, and they say they don't really know or how to use that, or even it exists. So I think that might be some of the low data. I think maybe they're
Yep.
not trying to put it out there because they know they'll all get, but then they said there was a point where, like, you could just rate something happy or sad, you know, like, it wasn't really that's not really gonna give you a lot of,
There's actually, so the elementary's been a challenge because they're not quite carrying their cell phones as freely, right?
Right.
But, so what we have is a QR code that sits by the registers, and, you know, kids are probably blowing by those signs, but, so I assumed that, okay, this probably isn't being used at all. But then when they pull the data, we actually do have some that rate meals and do some things. So, yes, it's about a range of, I think, about 8 different levels, and there is a emoji smiley face to appeal to kids and all the way up to teenagers, right? But underneath that, there's verbiage, whether it's very good, ooh, I don't like this at all, there is verbiage that kind of is a little more of a descriptor up underneath there. So our challenge is, like you said, how do we get it out to more people and help them provide that feedback to us? And I'm hoping this student committee will be able to maybe do some of that work for us.
that'd be outstanding. Because, you know, and I think they've got other feedback too, as well as, does this taste good or not? But, or are you always running out of this certain item by the time it gets to my lunch and I'm disappointed? Or, you know, that kind of, there's a lot more feedback that I think could really elevate this department.
Yes.
I mean, granted, it's school lunch. It's only going to be as good as it can be with all the nutritional standards we have to abide by, right? I get that.
Sugar and salt.
You know, but
They don't
but I-
want to let us
but I-
use any of
But
it.
I think the moment you get more students involved in this process, who
Yeah.
can at least be that, who can carry that information, be the torchbearers back to others and start sharing what they know, maybe that helps, you know, for stakeholders.
I think it's extremely important. So there's going to be a heavy focus on that, and Ms. Milliken agrees that, you know, the more information, the better. And we can't just rely on a manager. They're so busy, and they're working managers in the kitchens to be able to go out and really engage the kids all the time. So that's part of when those area managers are out there, you know, cruise around not just the kitchen, but also the cafe area and really engaging with the kids and asking them some more in-depth questions about, you know, the meals that they're eating.
I've got one clarifying question. So I'm all for succession planning. I think we need to always do more of that, and I think this change is necessary. My question is that once the supervisor becomes the director, when the director retires, or whenever that is, do we intend on keeping that supervisor position, or would we look at cutting that back depending on who that next person is? And if they're going to be here 10 more years, do we really need that level there instead of just empowering the managers and the folks below? I just never want us to get too top-heavy. I want us to add those positions for succession, but after that, I'd like to see them taken out unless there's a good reason to keep it.
That's an excellent point, and it's something I've thought about also. I think as we continue to build schools and continue to grow
Yeah.
a lot, I think we'll have to keep an eye on that. But my thought also was, okay, we need to evaluate it at that time. And my hope is that we may be able to pull a layer out. And perhaps, because the director and the office manager will be going out at the same time. So the hope is that maybe that's one of the two maybe we could absorb and continue to move forward. But really, it's just watching, the success and the growth there. And as you guys know, food service, that fund is an area where we have some room to move around a little bit and try and prepare and improve. Both on, we're always striving to, battle the supply chain to get the best quality food we can in for our kids. Like we buy the highest level of chicken we can and things of that nature, which I'm not sure how great that is, right?
It's not great.
Yeah, so I can't imagine the sponge that exists at the lowest level, right? So we're always trying to do that also. But I agree, that's something I will keep a constant evaluation on.
All good, thank you.
Yep.
I hate to dive into, this is really a whole separate conversation, but when you talk about this being the highest grade of chicken,
Yeah.
is there another company that also has the highest grade of chicken? So last night, sincerely, last night around my dinner table, the kids are all talking about school lunches, and they're all talking about how they have to eat around black spots in the chicken, and this is what everybody does. Like, there's a sudden weird black spot on the chicken. And so, like, everybody in the cafeteria, they eat around the spot. And, like, this is a normal thing. And I heard it from elementary, from middle, and from high school. So it's not like like a random batch of chicken. And I would love
I'm
to go
not
home and
sure.
say that's the highest grade you can buy.
It is.
They're going to be surprised at that.
With
Black
100%.
spot is an indicator that it's the highest.
Yeah, that's right. That's a mark of quality.
That's the mark of quality.
Apparently it's gross.
But I can undoubtedly say we're buying the best grade of chicken products that we possibly can. Whether there's something, an issue with a batch, or if there's something that's going on, I mean, those are things we keep an eye on, and we're striving to get the best we can. We have got, in our supervisor spot currently, she's constantly leveraging and working within purchasing groups and working with different vendors to get the highest quality products that we possibly can. It's a challenge, and the more restrictions they place on us, the more difficult it's becoming.
That's what I was going to mention, just, it's more of a statement than a question, but in my limited dealings with Mrs. Milliken, she has expressed the challenges associated with what we're able to do based on the dietary restrictions. And as an education agent.
Person.
Right? I feel like sometimes when we look at our legislative priorities, obviously there's things that are associated with education. But if the kids aren't eating their lunches, if they're literally throwing them away, then they're not going to be properly educated either. So I've often asked her, how can we support you? And it's really in the changes associated with the nutritional requirements and restrictions. And so I don't know if we can put that on the radar for our
100%.
legislative, requests next year, but I think that they would feel
I think it's all
supported.
federal though, right?
Yeah.
It is federal, but can we not lobby federally as well? We're
I was
not-
there, I was like, I'd love to put the student group on a bus, and we go to DC every year anyway, right? So, on a field trip.
They are
Would it make
frustrating.
any sense to do, if we're going to keep talking about food, that we do as a workshop? Because I think we're talking about positions.
We are.
We are, but I
just wanted to say it.
I didn't go there. I just touched on it.
They literally are going to take away
Yeah.
salt. Like, they're
Yeah.
going to take it away, and I get it, but not really. So anyway.
But I think we go to Washington right now, quit talking
Well,
about
let's
this.
do it. Let's do it. I'm leading, you're leading that. We need a spreadsheet like you're.
That's right.
Spreadsheet with nutrition.
Grains of chicken.
Yes. Okay, sorry.
Okay. And if you guys have any more questions, feel free to ask me, and we'll look for a different time to discuss that.
I think I heard you ask for another workshop on,
That's what I heard
On
too.
chicken spots.
right.
Okay, moving forward. Operations, so we'll have a couple guests with us today. First is Ms. Randall in the room, hopefully. We'll have Ms. Randall come up and talk about an additional position that she would like to discuss. And then after that, Mr. Carr will come up.
Yes, so After working with facilities for the last couple of years, one of the gaps that I have noticed is in our pre-GMP reviews. So we have our project managers. They are out there managing projects. And of course, we have been adding project. We're adding 2 more. And that limits their time and their focus to doing plans reviews. And this is separate from building code reviews, because once it gets to building code, they are looking for code minimum, right? So, in order to pre-GMP do plan review, it takes a lot of focus. You have to sit down, you have to flip through, you're working with your construction managers, you're working with your architects, you're making sure that not only are we getting code minimum before it goes to the code reviewers, but we're also getting the items that the district wants, the quality, the quantity, the products that the district wants. And we haven't really had the time to do that. There's state statute that says that we're doing it. We are doing it, but it's not the thorough review that I think that we need. And so this position would be somebody whose focus is solely design review prior to sending a project out for GMP, that phase 3 review that the statute requires us to do.
So I do have a comment on this one, certainly in support. I get this question or this feedback all the time from our main electrical and plumbing subcontractors that just see as they build more and more schools and going across and just trying to be able to clean this stuff up and be more consistent in what we're putting on each campus, from the maintenance side of things,
Yes.
from the replacement of light fixtures, and if we're buying the same ballasts at every single school, that makes sense. And of course, as that technology changes, we'll change with it. But in the interim, having more consistency across those plans is only going to help us in the long run, and I think this is a great addition, so
Yes,
good job.
it is also, what we've also seen is that with the supply chain issues that we're
Yeah.
facing, there's suggestions that, you know what, we can't get this soon enough, let's try and go to this product. And we need somebody who has that specialized knowledge to make sure that, yes, that product actually meets the needs that we want, the quality, the maintenance, that we can maintain it, coordinates with maintenance to make sure that that's something that they can support.
So would the skill level of this person be that of, say, a mechanical engineer? Is that,
It doesn't necessarily need to go that high. I mean, that's, we hire mechanical engineers to do that design work. What they need is the experience to be able to evaluate the equipment, to be able to read those plans and say yes, and to look for, gaps or things that we don't necessarily need, right? And so somebody who has a lot of experience in the field and yet maybe is ready to get out of the field and have a desk job. And then, they wouldn't necessarily be in the field except when they need to go support the project managers to tell them what you're looking for and help them with that.
And Kelly, you don't feel like that we can contract this? Because I hate putting a $100,000 position because we don't know how long we're going to be growing. And once it becomes a position, then typically it stays.
We could, I think we are looking at probably another 10 years of continued steady project work. Could we contract with somebody? Certainly. There's firms that do that. Could we contract for somebody for the same price? I don't think so.
I'd
We
be
have,
interested in knowing if we could.
we can
Because
reach
you
out
add
to a couple of
benefits and-
people and see how much they would charge, but
Because it seems to me that once the standards are written, they ought to be in every school. I can't imagine, if you're hearing from trades that they're different from school to school.
They are.
That is, right off the bat, that seems like ridiculous.
right. Well, and, we give the architects, but
But we give
they
them,
all
we
have
give them
their
a
own
standard
kind of
though,
thing.
right?
We do. But, they all have their own way of doing
Yeah.
things as well. And so it's making sure that we're getting that what they're providing us matches our standards.
And it's duplication too. It's extra runs of wire and additional things that we don't need that just kind of get lost in the weeds that I think this position pays for itself 10 times over.
Well, and I will agree with you
Well,
100% on
Okay,
that.
I disagree.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
No,
I
I
can
think
give
that
you
we can look at it.
a solid example if you want. There's,
Please.
we found 3 extra exit lights. Sounds like a very small thing, right? Code officials don't necessarily find that because they're extra. They're more than we need. Just eliminating those is $30,000. That's a
But who
third
found
of this.
Who found
That
it?
was one of the project managers who found it, but it was post-GMP. And so when we get that credit back, it is not as big a credit as if we had found it before the GMP. You know, just a few of those adds up to more than this position.
Year after
But
year
we
after
will-
year.
I'm sorry?
This is 103 every year. So those 3 lights is a one-time. This is every time.
But
And you would think that
every
if you got the
project,
standard-
there's going to be equivalents of it. But we can certainly look and see how much that contracting would be and bring that back. Okay?
Thank you, Kelly.
Excuse me, while you're here. Okay. This is off subject, but real quick for the board. You sent an email. Is that a call to arms that we need to be at that county commission meeting?
Good question.
I do think that some support, it's of course harder to say no when you're in front of them than it is when I'm in front of them.
I did not understand the coaching, because you also asked for us to reach out. So did every board member understand what this issue is about?
I was going to call her. so-
I was going to call too.
Yeah.
So you got us all right now.
Okay.
If it's real quick. I mean, I don't want to dive the rest, but.
Okay, so basically, you know, we know that impact fees are a sensitive subject with the Board of County Commissioners. And so the agreement that you had that came before you has been agreed to by the seller is to purchase that property with impact fee credits. So basically, for me, it is a way to spread the impact of that purchase out over a longer period of time. Yes, it ends up costing the same amount of money because we don't then get those impact fees in revenue, but it basically helps with the cash flow. We don't then have to pay $2.2 million flat out and lose that from our cash flow. This one, to me, it's the first one, right? So do we have the $2 million to buy this property if this doesn't go through? Yes. However, we are also looking at multiple school sites that we need to acquire throughout the district. And so it is as much a test as I think anything. And so my fear is that they will just turn this down and, you know, decide not to approve it, in which case that avenue kind of goes out the window for us.
So have you gotten a sense that they might not? Because it doesn't make
There
any
was,
sense.
you know
if
what,
there
there
would
was
be
a
any pushback.
little bit of language from some of the emails from county staff that was kind of on the, if they do, and, you know, they don't seem to be in a rush to get this moving forward. And so there's just a few things that are giving me a little bit of,
I just don't see the downside to
I
it.
don't
Windows of
either. That's what I
anxiety.
don't understand.
When you purchase with impact fee credits, that's at today's rate, right? So if the commission were to increase the impact fee later or reduce the impact fee later, it's still locked in at
Yeah.
this, right?
But they're at the lowest threshold right now because we have a
Just keeps
progressive.
going up. every
Well,
year.
unless they think that they're going to get votes to cut the
Unless they
impact fee
think
in
that
half
they-
or something, and then
Yes.
now this person is on the hook for all these impact fees, and, oh, if we had only waited, we
But
could
they've
have.
agreed to it.
well, it's
Right,
an
right.
amount. It's not necessarily an impact fee. So they basically get an
X amount of value,
account
yeah.
that is, you know, $2.25 million worth of impact fees. You know, our impact fees only passed by 3 votes. So it only takes one person to say, you know what, I don't want to lock us into continuing impact fees. And there might be a perception that by approving this agreement and future agreements, then they are somehow locking in educational impact fees for some unknown period of time. So, you know, it's, maybe I'm overthinking it. There's a very
I don't
good
think there's a
possibility of
downside
that.
to overthinking it. It's far better than the alternative.
Yeah, not
But-
in this case.
Yeah.
You
You
know.
reported to us.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think it, you know, once we get a couple under our belt, or even this one under our belt,
Yeah.
maybe not. But because this is the first one, I think kind of a show of support and a show of, this is important to us, either one-on-one or at the meeting, is appropriate.
Which property was this one?
This is the Wellness Way Elementary School.
Wellness Elementary, all right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I thought we were doing the high school and that the elementary was going to be,
No, the elementary we are paying for with the impact fee credits. The high school, I think just because it's a much larger amount, they did not want to do impact fee credits, so we will be paying cash for that one, knock on wood. If I ever get them to contract.
okay, I'm ready to go back to lunches.
Sorry, that's all right, that ship has sailed.
Bill, this is about positions.
Instead, you get Mr. Carr. Mr. Carr?
Oh, boy.
And I promise I won't talk about cedar wells.
What about nematodes? Can we hear about some?
We can talk about nematodes if you want. Just get your checkbook out for that. Yeah, well, mine is actually short and brief. You can see grounds and maintenance, and we'll go over those. You can see we actually adhered to the, I'm going to give my team a pat on the back to the superintendent's request, what we can do to save money for the district at the same time making it more efficient. And then one of the things that's near and dear to my heart, as well as Chad and Kim's, is to provide opportunity to retain experienced and seasoned personnel. So we've combined these positions to create an elevated position for just that, and that will greatly benefit the district. And it's the intent is to be more efficient with regard to the maintenance side of things and less go-backs. And on the grounds, with my irrigation tech, this individual has unique skill sets to where we would be also more efficient in doing repairs and not calling for a third-party contractor to do some of the repairs that we've needed on stuff that's aged out with regard to timers, wiring, and pumps for irrigation.
Perfect.
Thanks, sir.
Well done.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Okay. Next up, we'll move to our teaching, learning, leadership slide, and we'll first start with Ms. Frances Sellis. If she would like to come up.
Good morning. So in the area of student support services, we really just had one spot that we were focusing on today, and it's in the area of our nurses and student services. So as you know, we added the nurse manager, gosh, I think it was last year, and the one nurse manager for all schools in all regions was quite the challenge. So what we're proposing this year is we're looking to delete that position. We learned and found out, like we tried it didn't work. And then the shift would be that the 3 district health educators that work within the district and support the schools anyway, and the nurses in the clinics, would assume the responsibilities of that additional layer of support for the clinics. They've had lots of conversations within that department and feel strongly that that can be accomplished as a regionalized approach and like very intentional about what that would look like. So with that, we're looking to elevate kind of what Mr. Carr was saying in terms of looking at retentions. You know that the nurses, the RN salaries has been kind of a topic of conversation every year. It's been hard to retain those positions and keep those quality people in our schools for some of those retention purposes. So looking to elevate the registered nurses to the professional managerial scale on the PM3, what's it called? Range 3?
Yes, right.
And then that will we're hoping that'll help keep those people in place in a more consistent basis. And then in terms of mental health liaisons, as we're growing, we're looking at adding an additional mental health liaison to our K-8 schools. When you think about that kindergarten through 8th grade, elementary and middle responsibilities on that position to making sure that we're providing the most services for those students. And then Lake Success Elementary is currently sitting at a 0.5 mental health liaison. And as we look to expand that population in these coming years with some of the different structures that we have in place, knowing those are some of our highest need students in the district, we're looking to make that a whole position. So that's what the 2.5 looks like. So an additional at the K-8s to account for the K-8 population, and then the other 0.5 at Lake Success Elementary.
Yeah, I appreciate looking at the retention. I've heard a lot about that. That's been a problem.
I think this will be very helpful.
And again, have the millage dollars there to be able to devote to this, I think is even more
Yes.
impactful. So that's
We're very grateful for
Great
that.
work.
So it doesn't impact the other
Yeah.
buckets.
thank you.
And the last portion on this slide, I'll just
Can I, I'm so
Okay.
sorry.
No,
This
you're
is not
fine.
on the staffing plan, so,
Okay.
but it's probably, should be put in your ear. My question was, I've heard from a couple of ESE parents who are in our regular education schools. They're not in a self-contained classroom. They're inclusion classrooms, about the contracted employees that we have that are working with students. And those contracted individuals are communicating with the students that they don't know if they're going to, where they'll be placed or how their contracts will come back. And some of the concern was that these students get attached to these consultants that we have. And so if there was a way for us to consider when we're re-employing or recontracting those people so that they can have some consistency with those students, that would be great.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
And we are looking at ways, again, for retention and the opportunity to watch our budgets, but look at direct hire
Correct, right.
options is
I
really what we're
understand
looking
that.
at. And so, and some of those positions especially, we are trying to figure out how we can look at a direct hire opportunity that would keep us out of the contracting business of exactly what you're saying. So each year, could it be someone different? They're in a different place, they've contracted in a
Right.
different district, a
And they get
different
to know the
agency.
student, and there's a trust that's established, and then next year there's somebody completely different. And I understand it's a contracted position, so
Yes.
it's challenging. I didn't know if we could, the timing could change or
We are looking
something.
at a proposal to look at a more direct hire situation, and I
Okay.
think will remedy some of that.
Okay, good. Thank you. That was position related, just not.
So the last section in curriculum instruction and assessment, we're adding one manager of special projects, and essentially this person will be in charge of working on high-level district priorities and initiatives that we're moving forward with, things such as Algebra Task Force, our leadership pipeline, which our pool has gotten, it's pretty shallow at the moment, so we recognize that that's a critical area of need, and then other projects that, other special projects and initiatives that will need a heavy amount of focus on.
I'm very happy to see this. I have an interest in the pool, so I would be interested in anything that's going to improve that, so.
Yeah, I think we've
that's a
reached a
good call.
critical point in that area that we've got to keep bringing up our instructional leaders and elevate the ones who want to move up the chain a little bit. Okay, we're at the 30-minute mark, and we'll bring up Mr. Weeks.
The hour
Yeah.
It should be, yeah, you say that, but y'all talked about chicken for like 8 minutes, right? So like, I mean, in fairness. So,
It's important.
I
Dang it,
understand.
people.
And impact fees.
Are we staffing chickens? Anyway, long story short is that this is actually not quite as complicated as it sounds. One of the things that I think our IT department does very, very well is our support ratio, if you include students and staff, is about 1 to 948 souls or people. And so that's pretty lean to some extent, right? And so one of the things that we're able to do is that obviously leveraging some of our great talent, and I have amazing administrators and a very, very good team. We're not really adding any positions. I know we're adding some people as far as like students and staff and all that type of thing. So our support ratio is kind of increasing to some extent. But I think one of the things that's important about IT departments is they stay agile. They don't get bloated. And I also think it's important, if you're going to be agile and lean, that you retain your people. And so part of this is a little bit of reshuffling to some extent. Last year, one of the things, and probably the main driver behind this particular staffing plan is last year, we actually did add people, not necessarily to the district, brought them over. We didn't make any changes at that point because some of it needed to be to get to know the team, to get to know their way of work. But one of the things that we found is there's a commonality. And so the commonality is that whether you're working on, it's always network systems and devices to some extent. And that's even true in the security world. It hangs on a network, it's a device, it's a camera, and it hangs on a system so we can do things like recording. Same with lock system, anything else, right? And so part of what we're doing is that we're trying to basically consolidate to where our IT department and our safety and security department that were added last year match, if you get what I'm saying, as far as like some of the positions. These aren't one-off positions that sort of float out there and are kind of odd. So real fast, I'll kind of go through it. One of the things that we have right now is somebody who's leading the work. is a district safety and security technology specialist. In the IT world, we've had managers, and so in this particular case, this person happens to manage people and systems in this particular case, and so we're kind of sort of changing that position over as a result of bringing safety and security in. And one of the other things that we're doing, which is kind of it's more of a realignment, you'll see the job description come up, it's an updating of a job description that's kind of older, is that we're changing one senior network system engineer to an IT manager for operations. And so there's no cost in that particular thing. One thing that we are very, very aware of, I don't know if any of you have ever worked on a help desk. It's an interesting job, right? Like, nobody calls you, go, hey, are you having a great day? Like, it's a lot of people who are obviously seeking solutions, and it's kind of repetitive in nature to some extent. I think one of the things that's hard about help desk too is that if you're a help desk, some of the great people who've staffed our help desk, you're kind of isolated where you're not out in the field. So like sometimes the problems that you're getting presented over the phone don't make as much sense because you're not out in the field seeing them. And we're not disbanding the help desk. We're still going to have a help desk. But what we're doing is we're taking our technician ones and we're creating a rotation schedule where they're out in the field. And that gets them kind of sort of connected to what's going on in the school, what's going on in the classroom, what that support looks like. But a day or so, a week, they're coming back and they're servicing the help desk, if you get what I'm saying. And so by doing that, we feel like we're connecting them closer to the work. The help desk manager position, we're basically kind of sort of shelving. So as a result, we're shelving the help desk manager position. And so that person will become basically an IT security systems engineer. I'm going to tell you, had an interesting couple of weeks. We think that's pretty important. And because there's not going to be necessarily, even though there is a help desk, we're folding that under another manager, the same manager who does support. It's almost like there doesn't have to be a help desk manager sticking out there. That can just fold under our normal support workflow. We have this position that we inherited from safety security known as audiovisual tech support technicians. We're changing them to a position that we already have in IT, which is junior network engineers. We feel like that fits better. That AV tech support technician is an old job description. And we feel like we're going to move those folks over there. And then we have one AV tech that we're going to move to a tech support technician 2 as we kind of sort of redivide the work. As I just explained, those help desk technicians, they're going to basically fold into tech support 1 technicians, so they will be out in the field doing that work. And then we have these safety and security technicians, again, kind of an older job description, and we're moving them to a tech support technician 2, which aligns with the rest of our organization. We already have those, and we just feel like it makes sense to bring them in. One position that we have is a record specialist. That job, if I'm being honest with you, is probably been condensed through technology, automation, to about like 6 or 7 hours a week. To some extent, we've been assigning other roles. And we do have a need to bring in a position that already exists, an account access control specialist. This will help us with audits. This will help us with making sure that we have a kind of a change in how charter schools who may leverage some of our network resources that we're required to provide them, but they're no longer in our HR system. So there's a little bit more of a manual process. There's just a whole bunch of different processes. So we're going to convert that, and that person will also help us manage the kind of remainder of record specialist type roles. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we're doing. One thing that I do want to point out before I take any questions is we are trying to be strategic about how we aren't impacting the general fund. And so all of these changes, I could add one position for $51,000, but it would not give us the pop, honestly, that it would to make these changes to existing positions, if you get what I'm saying. So our goal is to be very strategic about it. And we will be using a capital fund transfer, as there's been a little bit more leniency on the rules of what we could fund with capital as opposed to what we could have to use the general fund for, if that makes any sense.
I do have a couple questions along that line, and I'm all for protecting the general fund, but I'm also all for protecting the capital fund, because that's becoming more and more of a concern. So my question is, the district safety and security tech specialists moving to an IT security, and the 5 safety and security tech ones moving to tech support. Could we have funded those positions before out of the safety and security millage dollars? And if so, are we now unable to fund them out of that money because now they're an IT security or a tech support technician?
I think it's based on the function. I would probably have to defer to Scott.
Mr. Ward's our next guest.
Yeah.
So,
Because, I mean, I would rather fund those people, if they're still doing safety and security and we can fund them out of that millage, I'd rather fund them there and have them more
Fortunately,
focused.
The increases that we've been seeing in our contracts with our law enforcement agencies.
Yeah,
And the other positions that were added, that we're not comfortable that we have enough funding to cover these out in the village.
okay. Even with
We
the
have
property
that.
value increases and everything else, we don't think the increase is going to keep up with it? Okay,
Look at the summary sheet in this presentation at the end, you'll see what we're
Perfect.
adding this year to the village already.
but have we in the past, or could we even fund those titles before safety and security tech specialist? Could that, or was that funded out of the millage, do you
We try to
know?
stay away from all capital because that's a separate type of millage request. So
Right.
Technically, if you're going to do a capital millage, you have to do a separate vote.
Okay,
It is a separate millage.
okay, yeah.
I don't think that was the question.
Yeah, so no, so for example, that district safety and security tech specialist, was that position before funded out of the millage, or has that always been funded? Okay. Could we have done that, do you know?
It would have been a stretch.
Does it fit? I mean, I know they get very technical on what fits in that box and what doesn't, just when I see
It would
those
have been a
words.
stretch.
Okay. No, again, I appreciate not putting it on the general fund, and I know we're being thoughtful with this, but as much as we can take away or not take away from the capital fund as well with all the growth that we still have to do, I think is always going to be
And I think that's
impactful.
generally a philosophy. So one thing that is a little bit of a side conversation, but it is something that's important to help with that, is that we've been very aggressive in E-rate. So a lot of the things that, I mean, very aggressive in E-rate. And so a lot of the equipment that we have bought that may be like coming out of capital, we've seen 85 to 90, and we're talking millions of dollars, right? Like 85 to 90% of that money has come back through that federal
Yeah.
grant, for lack of a better purpose. So we are very, very, I think that's one of the things, a little bit of a different stream, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I think that is something that we've been watching. We take every advantage that we possibly can.
I never doubt what you do, Dwayne. I think these positions make a ton of sense and where they're coming, and the impact is minimal. It's
Sure.
just if we can continue to make that impact smaller, same position, same everything, just if we can fund it out of millage, if those dollars are there,
Sure.
I think is something to always look at.
Of
But
course.
good work, thank
Yeah.
you.
Any other questions? Okay, good deal. Thank you.
All right. Now we're moving into our changes that are coming along with our ESSER cliff and how we're going to manage that situation. Essentially, you'll see kind of two categories when it comes to funding source. Either a few positions that were moved to ESSER because we had the ability to do that at the time, and now they're going back to the general or designated grant, or things that have been designated that we need to keep and will now be part of a grant source or a different funding source or the general fund. So looking at these, you've got the finance and risk management, and whenever you guys have had the rationalization on adding those in the past, but the .6 senior accountant will go back to general, or will go to general, and the environmental specialist will now be part of the capital fund transfer, similar to what we just discussed. The human resources, which is under myself, the non-instructional recruitment partner, I think we found that that position was an absolute key to our success of being able to continue to staff and recruit talent in all areas. While we haven't resolved all issues, the amount of work and effort, and in combination with our instructional recruitment partner, I'm not sure we will survive without the work of those two. So that's why our priority has been to hold on to that, and they would go to the general fund. Our choice in alternative education, there's one administrative coordinator that was added and now will be covered by the Title IV grant. College and career readiness, the one manager of school counselors will move to the general. And then curriculum instruction assessment, the manager of MTSS, which we've had for years, will return to the split that it covered before, which was 50% Title I and 50% general. And once we get done, I know y'all have specific questions. I'll just go through all of them and then we'll go. Federal programs, you see, the positions will, those positions will be covered by VPK funding from the general. And then in our regions, the 3 teacher instructional support program specialists, those were the positions that were assigned and that are assisting with supporting our new teachers. Those were added, and now they will go to the general. And then the 3 program specialists were existing before, and they support our regions and those regional executive directors and the work they do in supporting out the schools, and they will return to the general. So there are people in the room that might be able to assist with specific questions if need be, but we'll start back with the other slide if necessary, and we can go from there.
I only have one. What is an environmental specialist and what do they do?
So they go in and look when there's environmental issues like mold, mildew, and those kind of things.
Yeah.
And determine what kind of remediation needs to take place.
Okay. Similar to what Mr. Mathias was saying earlier, is that something that you think we need on staff, or can that be contracted on an as-needed basis, or is there enough going on where
There's
you need
enough
that
going on.
position?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Are there any ESSER positions we did not keep?
That was my question.
'Cause, you know, I know we had this talk, you know, a number of years ago when all this money came in and we created all these new positions and we said, well, these are great while we've got the funding for them, but our fear is that when the funding ends, this is all gonna go back to the general fund, and so I'm just wondering if.
And obviously it did not, because we're not, right, we didn't assume millions.
We're at the day of reckoning, and that was,
That's
I
correct.
think
that
was
was gonna come
concern.
eventually.
Yes.
We knew it was going to come, and now it's here. But with those funds, genuinely, from my seat, that we need to make sure that when the funds end, that's typically like when a job ends, right? And so there really needs to be some scrutinizing that we truly, truly need those positions, because this is an awful, awful lot of money.
So we're talking $732,000 is the ESSER impact to the general fund. Is that right?
Yes. Now, some of that was existing prior to.
Some of that was existing prior to.
Correct.
So do you guys know, like, can you speak to which
I can
positions
speak to
weren't
my-
rehired
I can
to
speak to
start?
my .6 senior accountant, or that they're the ones that handle all of the budget and reporting to DOE, and that's more than doubled.
I
the last few
I think
years.
I'm going back to Mr. Dodd's question, is what positions did we cut?
The positions that were in this side of it, the staffing plan, none that I'm aware of. Some of them were moved to other funding sources, and then some of them were moved back to the general fund.
I think the thoughtful part to keep in mind on this is that because we knew this was coming, on the front end, we were very careful not to put a lot of positions in ESSER. If you'll recall, going back to the ESSER plan, there was a lot of capital projects and other things that we focused on, knowing that we didn't want to be in the position that we see a lot of districts in across the state, where they're having to eliminate positions. And so I would say that this was a very thoughtful process from the beginning. You know, the ones that we added, that we said that we would evaluate, would be the instructional support program specialist for new teachers. Kathy just walked out the door, but this was something that we worked in collaboration with LCEA. I think that she would certainly talk about the benefits of that. And I know Dr. Scott has been very instrumental in the oversight of these individuals and the impacts, and I know she's prepared to speak to that if you want to know more about that. But those were the 3 positions that we said we want to try and then evaluate, and I'm strongly advocating that we keep those programs because we've seen the impacts and the supports for new teachers, and that's only going to grow as I think about the work with Lake Sumter and the new education program. We see that these individuals will be instrumental in helping to support those new folks coming into our schools as well. So if, I don't know if you want to hear from Dr. Scott on those, but those were the main 3 that we talked about that said, okay, we're going to have to evaluate these when the funding goes away, so.
What about some of the school-based tutor support, kindergarten, first grade support, after-school, the summer school? I mean, there were some positions, I think, school-based, which I realize this is district, but those positions, are we?
You're referring to, like, there's some miscellaneous ESSER grants that we were doing some tutoring and stuff, all that will end whenever those grants end.
And what happens to those humans?
What
What
happens?
happens to the people?
Oh, so
They're not
most
part
of
of this.
those individuals, or in fact, I think all those individuals are already in existing positions. They're just getting paid extra duty to come in and do extra
So those
things.
extra duties will end for
Correct.
them. So I guess my wondering is, have you done any sort of analysis on which one's going to have a stronger educational impact, that tutoring or these?
Have I done that? No.
Well, not you specifically, but somebody, right? Because if we've only got a limited number of funds, I want to obviously pick the ones that's going to make the biggest educational impact for our kids, right? And so, I don't know how effective those tutoring programs are versus how effective these people are. And so if you can only pick one, how do we know which one to pick?
Well, in regards to the tutoring dollars, we know that we have multiple funding sources that come in specifically for tutoring, to the point that schools will say, I don't have anybody who wants to do these additional duties. They have so much money that's always earmarked for that. So I don't think that you will see a reduction in services or support for kids at all.
And I'd say, building off that, I can't speak to the other regions, but the two folks in Region 2 at the bottom that's really funding the majority of this general fund increase have done incredible things for our Leesburg area schools, and I think those positions, being able to roam across all the schools in those regions, are so critically important in what the general fund is there to do, to support students, support teachers. And I think at least those 6 at the bottom, in my mind, seem like they would have a good return. The other ones I think we can certainly have conversations about, but those 6 primarily I think are incredibly important.
And I appreciate your confidence in those 6, but it would be nice to specifically see what they have done or what they are contributing.
I agree.
I think we can better understand it if we know what they're doing and not just be told, they're supporting. How are they supporting? What exactly do they do to support? Because I guess I'm having a little bit of difficulty in understanding the difference. I mean, I understand new teacher support, but where's the line drawn? The top 3, the instructional support program specialists and the 3 program specialists, what are the differences in the levels of support that they provide?
So, and I can't explain the differences in level of supports, but the reason why they're broken out separately on this is because 3 of them were originally in general, and we moved them over to use up our ESSER funding.
Okay.
And so we're moving them back. The other 3 have been added, so that's why they're separated out here.
Would you be okay if Dr. Scott came and spoke to that? Because really, we're talking about the 3 new teacher coaches, which were the ones that we added. The other ones were existing positions. Again, it was just a funding shift.
The second line from the bottom, those are the teacher instructional, that's the teacher coaches. That's the one that you've worked with LCA on, and you all are feeling, Kathy, sorry to put you on the spot here, but you're seeing the value in that. Is that right?
We haven't had the conversation yet.
So Dr. Scott is prepared to speak to that, if we can give her a few minutes to talk about that. I think it's important. This was one we added. We said we're going to be very thoughtful about, and there will be oversight of the impacts, and so she has done just that and done a great job overseeing that.
And for the LCA side, we just finished our bargaining last week, our first or second session, and that's one of the subcommittees that will be coming back together, because that's where some of this work started last year. So we'll be coming back together and inviting Ms. Scott to come and provide us with updates from a bargaining standpoint and the impact for the union. So that's currently being scheduled.
So, well, to answer the question about whether or not this is really important, this is work that I'm very proud of. It began kind of like in the summer of last year, like end of July. Sorry, thank you. For the new teacher support, and we've, over the course of 8 months, have done a lot of things. We recognize that while we have strong strides, there's still areas of improvement. So what you're looking at is just really a snapshot for you to be able to reference to see some of the things that we've done. Beginning out is like the instructional retention data. That data is pulled from our district website, that is pulled together by our Human Resources Department. And actually, if you go into the actual individualized reports, you'll see how many of that instructional is actually embedded in the classroom, how many are not in the classroom. But I didn't want to inundate you with different data points. But the general idea is that you can see that there has been a progression in us being able to retain teachers, and that's one of the challenges that we experience, school level, you experience, and the concerns that you have. Now, what I will say to you is that the 94.4% is as of April 15th. And so I imagine that that will decline a little bit because we do have an uptick over the summer. But we are in a strong trajectory to retaining more teachers. And so to paint a clear picture about what those 3 individuals have done, they have compiled their data from August to April of this year. and they've had 942 documented experiences of what we do. And so that includes classroom visits, coaching cycles, monthly meetings, professional learning, and the TIS lead support. And so while those are just numbers on paper, and to put faces to these names, that the individuals who serve in these roles this year were Laura Burry, Cicely Bosley, and Courtney Franklin. And one of the things that I'm very appreciative of is that oftentimes when you get new positions, the challenge is also finding the right people for the job. And so I feel very fortunate that these people are passionate about this. And then at the district level, we have Dawn Boyd, who also supports. So with those ladies, Dawn Boyd and myself, we comprise of the district TIS team. And we have worked together collectively over each month. We've met to review some of our different data points. One of the changes that we had from the previous year was basically surveying. And so we thought that it would be really beneficial not to have just an annual survey, but to do monthly so that we could pivot and make adjustments along the way. And so there's been the survey data that we have. And so at the top, I just gave you a snapshot of some of the testimonials, but we had 311 TIS team members report in this survey. And that team, those individuals consist of mentees, mentors, the TIS leads at the school sites, who can be administrators and sometimes are not. But that's who that's comprised of when you're looking at the results from that. And so some of the highlights from that survey data is that 95% of those individuals feel that they receive the adequate support they need to be successful. 87 says that they indicated the level of communication was favorable and that there was an improvement. 80% satisfaction with the overall program, and then 86% was saying that they're very comfortable or extremely comfortable with asking for support. And so by no means do I feel that we have arrived in 8 months. This has been a big undertaking, but we have made some tremendous strides. To begin with, starting with the communication and being deliberate and identifying the tiers of support. Part of the challenge is communication, really, and just making sure that the TIS leaders at the school site know adequately what their roles are, what the supports are, so that those things can serve and be a support to the new teachers. And so we've spent a lot of time in doing that. We've restructured our TIS meetings. Last year, TIS leaders only met twice throughout the entire year. They've met quarterly this year, and the design of those meetings have shifted. Prior to that, they have been business in nature. Now they encompass professional learning. We're looking at statistics. We're looking at data from our district. And we also are doing professional learning so they are equipped to empower and provide learning to mentors who would then in turn support teachers in the classroom. And so part of that design and development comes from these new regional supports. So we're breaking down the data, we're looking at the feedback that we get from the quarterly TIS meetings, and then some of the other work that we know that needs to be in place. For example, there is a need to restructure some of the professional learning that we've had to support mentors and so forth, and that requires a lot. And there's a lot of cross-content that goes with that. So for example, like optimal learning, how that's functioning in our system, our PLCP program. Our PLC program produce high-quality teachers. They are among the strongest in our workforce. If you look at our data in terms of like our teacher of the year, rookie teacher of the year, the percentage of those individuals who've gone through that program. So just trying to create an alignment with the content, how we're developing these individuals and how we're keeping them in our district. And so this hasn't been just, it's been a lot of work that's been a lot of fun, honestly, and it's been very rewarding to see school leaders and TIS leads speak to the improvements. We also have learned in full transparency from the survey results that we still have work to do, but we're excited about that. We're clear about where we need to go. And so at the bottom, you'll see what some of those, outside of what I've just spoken to you about, what those specific program improvements are. And I think I've mentioned most of those, but two other points that I'd like to add is that we've added an additional stipend that for weekly support that mentors are paid in supporting of mentees in addition to the one that they get at the end of the year. So it's a nice incentive to show that we are prioritizing this work. In addition, we've trained 147 teachers to be mentors this year, and that will increase because we're adding an additional summer to keep up with the demand. And our year 2 goals is to further build our mentor capacity, differentiate support based on experience. We realize that once we're getting into the weeds of the work, that there is a need to differentiate learning and supports for a veteran teacher who's new to the district versus, newbies who are out of field. We're strengthening our partnership with certification and how that looks and support. We've always collaborated with them, but we've been really intentional about how we're doing things with that, and that's been nice. And we've, again, revising and developing our professional learning, increasing the collaboration among our TIS leads. We see that there is a need for us to share best practices in the time that they have together. And then again, just making sure that alignment across the other programs that support new teachers is intentional and deliberate. And so I guess in sum, I'd like to say that for what my little 2 cents is worth, I do feel a shift. We've received the feedback from principals, from mentors. We've not all arrived. I want to be very clear about that, but we are definitely moving in the right direction. So that's really all I have, unless you all have some questions, and I just want to thank you for the time to be able to articulate that.
Well, do you have questions, Mr. Dodd?
I do.
Okay.
But
I just have one. Would you like me to ask mine first?
why not? Maybe
Okay.
it's the same question I've got.
Well, first of all, I think your cents worth is at least 25. But one of the things that stood out for me was the professional learning. Comparatively speaking, that seems rather low. And I guess my takeaway would be, if these are new teachers, professional learning would have been very heavy, because especially if they're out of field, best practices would have been included. So I guess my concern is the fact that it's low, but I did note that you said it's going to be revised and you're going to develop. So are we going to increase that? Do we have things in place or strategies to make sure that we're doing a better job of that?
Absolutely, and I don't know if that number adequately depicts professional learning at large for new teacher support. This is where, for example, the new program specialists are asked to do a professional learning session on their campus specific to that. The professional learning is also happening through those classroom visits with the TIS leads and the monthly meetings, where we're trying to shift ownership at those levels. And so that is primarily, professional learning is embedded in each one of those pillars. So 20 isn't really a proper reflection of that when you're thinking about how it's happening at each of the levels. That was just to say the separate instances that were provided at a request of a TIS lead or an administrator on their campus, specifically for a whole group.
Okay.
But it's in all of those. Like the monthly meetings, those are professional learning sessions.
Okay.
The 71, the TIS lead support, sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And those classroom visits often lead to that professional learning, whether it's one-on-one, but it's not, it isn't documented as professional learning if it wasn't an official professional learning ask in almost in a formal way in that way. Okay. So that's how they're calculating that. Like each of the regionals are maintaining documentation based off of these areas, and that's how we defined it. And so that's how it's documented there. So I can reflect that for the next reporting, adjust that so that it more accurately reflects what we're doing in professional learning. I would agree with you as a director of professional learning.
Thank you for that clarification.
All these contacts, occurrences with new teachers, how many teachers do these numbers represent? I know that you got 311 who participated in your survey, but maybe they didn't all participate in the survey.
Yes, and that survey isn't all just teachers too.
Sure, right. So how many new teachers are we talking about?
Based off of that survey or just at large?
Based on like the 942 occurrences, so you got 547 classroom visits. Is that across 20 teachers? Is that across 500 teachers?
So I can't answer that to you honestly, because what that is a duplicate, that could be a duplication. So if I provide at a school site as a new regional program specialist, a classroom walkthrough visit, provide a professional learn, we didn't quantify it in that way. But I can go back and make an effort to do that and certainly do that moving forward.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because obviously we have to provide support for new teachers. And I think one of my biggest criticisms when I was first elected to this board, having been a fairly new teacher, not all that in the past from the time of my election, was that there were some people from the district who came and visited me, and they stopped in twice for 20 minutes, over the course of the entire year, and I said, okay, well, what was the point of that? Like, it was so little that it was just so ineffective that really the district could have spent its money elsewhere, right? That had zero impact on me as a teacher. There's one random person who stopped in 20 minutes twice. And so, obviously, you've got to do this enough for it to be effective.
Correct.
And so then I'm wondering, these 547 classroom visits, are they that I visited 547 people one time for 20 minutes? Or have I established an ongoing relationship with these people and I'm stopping in time and time again? Or do you, I mean, maybe you tailor that based on how much support they need, right?
So the survey data isn't the only way that we collect the data. And so that's one of the reasons why I am proud of the work, is because we are getting pulse at the ground level about how they are seeing that impact. Again, it's not at the level that we want. Even 80% of something, a satisfactory, isn't a mark that I would like to have. We're striving for higher, but keep in mind that this has been in place for 8 months. And so, but I get the other data points that you're speaking to specifically about teachers and their personal experience. Like, for example, in induction, and comparatively to like years past, when we ask the teachers in the room to indicate how many of them are aware of their mentor and who's providing support, in the past, they were not able to provide that. When 90+% at every one of those induction meetings can tell you that and say that support is adequate, we're making a mark.
I'm only interjecting because I have to leave, and like my mom heart is warring a little bit because this is a good discussion. I've been texted that the live stream has stopped, and there's people that are watching that are kind of interested in this work, so I don't know if it's back up again. Okay, well, that's good to know. And I do think, I know you had mentioned that if we had questions, I would like to follow up with this, so I know I'm stepping out, but definitely, I feel like there is tons of research to support the importance of new teacher programs, and that giving a program 8 months to do work is unrealistic. I 100% agree with you, and I feel like this program specifically has been through so many changes historically. I wish we could find some consistency, but I also know that it's difficult in the midst of how productive is this work, because to Mr. Dodd's point, there are so many needs that we have in the district, and I wonder how the coordination between the departments is working too. So we offer professional learning. How many of the new teachers that we're seeing are being indicated to or directed to the new learning that's taking place versus these people providing additional services, and where our services are overlapping? So I have a lot more questions. That's the point of this, and I'm talking really fast because I have to go. I would love to see you all at Legends Way Ball Field in Claremont at 7 o'clock tonight, when Eustis is going to bring home a second state championship. Bye.
I have just one question.
Yes, sir.
So we're in, what is that, our third year of ESSER funding? Why is this just 8 months?
That's 8 months is when these positions became about. There's 2 different positions that are identified on that one. One is the interventionist that was already in the grant that they're bringing back up. But this part that I'm speaking to, the 3, that just occurred as a result of this year. They just became effective this year, those in those positions. So starting in August, were they utilized in that role.
I think we were planning up to that to hire these positions, or?
No, this really came from a conversation with LCEA in regards to how can we stop the constant turnover of teachers. And so if you go back and look at the teacher retention piece, you can certainly see the impacts of these positions. But, we had, to Ms. Luke's point, we had various new teacher support type programs. We weren't seeing a lot of return on that investment. We were still seeing greater turnover. And you hear Kathy say all the time, think of the high cost of constant teacher turnover and then having to retrain teachers over and over again. And so, again, for me, if we think about a $240,000 investment, the cost of hiring new teachers over and over again is certainly going to exceed that. So I think there's certainly been a great return on investment, and I certainly agree that 8 months is not, I don't think you throw something out after 8 months. I think it needs more time, and the work that you have done and the data collection and just making sure that we were able to bring to you the evidence of the impact, I think is tremendous. So thank you for leading this work. So I am very excited and impressed by this, and I hope that once
We have the time.
we have more time to continue the work, that we'll continue to see the impacts, and so.
And we'll continue to improve. Like, this is just the beginning. We really are excited about the things to come, but I think that it's a good foundation.
Absolutely.
I think really my question was more so from the angle of, are there enough of these people for it to be effective? Right, because certainly we value, the work is, for
I think so. I think that the task is really to shore up the current structure that we have and making that quality. We are not trying to remove the onus on the schools and their influence on it, but just strengthen and support and the knowledge around them. And so I do think so. I just think that we have a little bit more work in ensuring that we have that consistency, that understanding across the entire district.
Thinking just back to my own personal experience, the greatest impact that led to my success, I think, was just the school-based mentors. And those people weren't receiving a stipend out of the time, they were just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. And, that's the one next door that you're establishing that relationship with, and you're seeing them 180 days out of the year, that's the one you're going to for help or
Yes.
questions. And so I'm thankful that component is part of this now. I think that was the big missing
Yeah.
piece before.
And as you can see on that year 2 goal, that's the first bullet, to further build that mentor capacity, because their roles are a challenge, they've evolved over the years, right? So not only are they just telling them where the copy is and who to go to for that particular thing, but they're also leaning in with some instructional support as well, as prompted and needed by the mentees. So making sure that they actually have the support and the knowledge to be able to be a good mentor to the mentees. To your point, because it was mine, I was out of field too, and that was a game changer for me.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I think was helpful was when administration they'd say, hey, okay, I'll come cover your class for 20 or 30 minutes so you can go see another teacher. Because the problem is when you're at that grade level, everybody's probably on the same schedule. And so how do I go see somebody else's math instruction if I'm also supposed to be teaching math? And so I don't know how much of that opportunity is in here for the mentors and mentees to be able to see that, but there's a great benefit when you can go see that live
Absolutely.
instruction. And it led to some success, so.
Thank you. I appreciate the thoughts for feedback. I'll definitely incorporate those pieces moving forward. So thank you for your time.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scott.
As the school year begins, and we never know what the DOE or federal government might roll out in terms of grants and opportunities, and so they can all tell you that I've asked everyone who oversees any of our federal grants to go back and look, or whether it's one of our state funding initiatives, to look at how we can absorb positions, how we can continue to grow programs without impacts to the general fund. And so they've done their due diligence to go back and maybe whether it's, and they were going to invest in people to support schools, and so they've done a lot of work. And so wherever there is some flexibility within those grants, we'll continue to shift funding away from general funds to be able to cover some of these costs, so that that remains a priority for us. And if I could just add one thing, going back to my slide in regards to school safety and security, you're going to see some changes probably in that area coming back to you. If you'll remember, we had conversation about a month or so ago with Ms. Cronin, who talked about transportation and discipline on buses. That has been a conversation that Mr. Farnsworth has continued to have with her. We have a meeting coming up. We've met with Mr. Fender to talk about how do we provide greater supports on the school side as well as transportation side in dealing with that. So they've looked at a couple of models. They're working on some job descriptions. So there may be some changes coming back to address that issue, but we want to work with Ms. Cronin on that. So we're still waiting to get that meeting scheduled to bring that to you.
I'm going to spend most of my summer in subcommittee meetings between both units, which just increasing communication and, in collaboration with those folks, so yeah.
So we're talking about adding a position to deal with kids that are disruptive on the bus?
We're not sure what we're looking to do at this point. We're looking at multiple different structures and options to help support our bus drivers, because they will tell you that, and Kim's mentioned it as well, that that's one of the reasons why bus drivers leave, is because of student behaviors on buses. So we're going to have to tighten that up and provide greater supports in that area to support our drivers, support our kids, and support the schools that are dealing with a lot of this as well. So
Why would we not just tell if a child is disruptive, they no longer ride a Lake County bus?
Yeah, and-
I don't think we need a position for that.
Okay, well, we're not sure right now without having the committee meeting to talk about those types of things, and how we're going to ensure that that enforcement is consistent. But you're right. This could be a much easier.
Should not be abused.
I agree. They should not. Yeah.
I don't think it takes, unless it's going to be a policeman that goes and tells them, maybe, I don't know, guardian.
We're going to work on that. Just know that conversation is continuing.
Okay, well, that brings us to the summative slide on the fiscal impact. Mr. Ward, you want to come back up in case there's any questions, but it's all pretty self-explanatory. It's a culmination of what you've seen in the total presentation and where it totals out. You've got your total general fund that which showed to the good, not spending as much. But then when you add in, keep in mind the ESSER to general, that's where the numbers increase and impact there. And, the general fund, the capital transfer we talked about, and then our increase to the millage, as Mr. Ward, in the prior conversation there a few minutes ago, how there's already weight being applied to millage, and he's watching that budget closely, to make sure we can afford everything we're moving over to these grants while, we always lean to protect the general fund, of course, but we also need to be mindful as we keep leaning to grants and leaning to other sources of revenue that we're not overextending those also.
Well, I think you just captured my concern exactly, because as I'm just kind of doing some quick math on this, is this total almost about $2 million fiscal impact? Granted, most of it's not general fund, but, all right, I mean.
Yeah, and I think a lot, you see the bulk of that is coming out of that ESSER to general, and that's a combination, right, as you know. Some going back that were in general before, and I think some of these district initiatives we talked about with some of those ESSER positions that came along with ESSER, they came along at a time where we had priorities and heavy needs that had to be addressed regardless. And it just so happened we were able to catch a little break with ESSER coming in to support some of those things like the new teacher folks. So I think it's a combination of, okay, maybe our needs evolved a little bit, maybe some of them were there already, and then, then as we continue to grow, our needs grow. But we're definitely, that's something we talk heavily about, is really watching, okay, it's been a great practice for years, right? But now we've got to really watch those other revenue sources to make sure we're mindful.
So in those other revenue sources, it's certainly a significant amount of money that is hitting those other revenue sources. And now I guess it won't be positions, but are there now other things that we were paying out of those revenue sources that we would now, they're not positioned, so they don't show up here, but are those other things going to potentially end up on the general fund?
So this speaks to specifically the impact on the staffing plan.
That's
So
right.
your point is there are other things that operate outside of the staffing plan. I haven't seen any significant impacts to where, okay, we're moving this, so therefore we can't do that. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I was just thinking, okay, if we're going to add $375,000 fiscal impact to the millage, for instance, are there now going to be things in the millage that are going to get displaced and go back to the general fund? They're just not positioned, so we don't see that as, as an impact here, but.
I can't speak to that specifically,
Yeah,
but
we're still working on the budget.
Sure.
To the end, if there's, obviously, if there's not enough money, we got to come up with
Okay.
an alternative. But we're not at that point yet.
Well, given our level of state funding, y'all are magicians, so.
And remember, there is ESSER funding that is continuing for the next several years, and so we've been able to strategically take things that were being paid out of SAI and other, which is the general fund, currently in terms of software purchases and things, we've been able to shift all that over to existing ESSER, that will help. That will free up actually some of that funding.
Okay.
Okay. Amazing.
Good work.
I appreciate you guys' time and attention. Thank you to all my colleagues in the room who have put a tremendous amount of thought and hours into this work.
Thanks for the updated, man, you're quick on
He's quick.
on the feedback. This is now really clear as to what is a task and what is a person, so.
That was Mr. Mayor.
Kudos. He's not even in the
The
room.
squiggles let me know it was Joseph.
Well, that's good, otherwise the feedback would go to his head anyway, so.
True.
Okay, I guess we're down to board member comments. Mr. Mathias,
I'm going to hold comments.
Mr. Dodd, Mr. Brandenburg.
Good.
Well, I just have a couple of things. I want to say that I am very happy to hear that we're going to look at discipline in terms of transportation. And yes, Mr. Mathias, in our discipline plan, they can be expelled from the bus. And that's not something in my tenure that we've aggressively sought, but I certainly think that with this new plan, that might be something that we really need to encourage schools to follow that plan. And it is possible that a student might be told, you no longer have the privilege of riding a bus, because it is a privilege. And then one other thing that I did get a citizen concern about, and I've gotten them repeatedly over the last 3 years, is the blackness. I don't know if it's mold, I don't know if it's mildew, I don't know what it is, on the sides of our buses. So if someone could please.
Hey, we're done with that.
Someone could just please check on that. Madam Superintendent, do you have any comments?
No, just thank you to everybody for all the hard work, very thoughtful work that went into today's presentation. Go Eustis, and happy last 2 days of school.
Mr. Cole? Ma'am. Well, with that said, unless there's anything further, I guess we are adjourned.
Perfect.